Well, I'm Brenden Martin, and he's not Buddy Martin. He's Mr. Franz Beard, a.k.a. the Iron Duke. I'm welcoming in tonight as co-host of the Buddy Martin Show. Franz, welcome to the program. Thanks for pinch hitting tonight. Buddy is on assignment. He will be back, I think, Wednesday, so we'll have him back. Franz, we have lots of really annoying things to talk about tonight, but we're going to talk about it. How are you, my friend?
Well, first and foremost, I'll tell everybody straight up, okay? I picked the Gators to win by 13. They got their clocks cleaned. So I own up. I made the bad call. I bought into the fact that the Gators, I thought they had put the silliness behind them when they had the Utah game. I thought the Tennessee game was the perfect time to, they had done it. They put it all behind them. And Tennessee showed that they had, well, guess what? They haven't.
Well, we will get into all that tonight. We have some good guests on tonight. Graham Hall will be joining us for the first half of the show, and then we have Franz got us a great guest for the second half, Zach Goodall from Sports Illustrated at UF will be joining us for the second half of the show tonight. So stay tuned. Bring your questions in chat. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button down here on the right side of the screen. Let's try to pick this thing apart responsibly. We've got some bites from Billy Napier, all that good stuff right after this.
It's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking, but be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
And dilly to all you folks out there tonight. I'm having a little bit more of a stronger drink for this evening, as this is my play hour, because I'm working and then parenting and all that good stuff. So welcome everyone to the show. We've got Perry Mason, Terry Johnson, Dan Bond, Robert Turner, Matt Lieb, narcissistful, wrong end again, Franz. Oh, that guy. Well, we'll deal with that later. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Don't forget, you can ask a question. If you want your question to jump up to the front, hey, drop a couple bucks in there and we'll make sure that happens. Okay, Franz. Well, as we wait for our first guest, Graham Hall, to join us this evening, you were at Billy's press conference today. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fairly telling, sort of probably the most I think I've seen him visibly sort of rattled, and I think understandably so. What was your take today after walking out of the press conference?
I thought Billy was as defensive as I've ever heard him. In fact, more defensive than I've ever heard him before. I think he understands that some things have got to change. He's not the type to go out there and announce that he's got a lot of changes to make, but I think he knows, and everybody else knows, that there have to be some changes made. You can't, Einstein's definition of insanity is you do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I can think of 3 or 4 times in this game, including a couple of critical ones, on 4th down, they ran a play. They're running a bunch formation. Kentucky's already whipping them badly on the line of scrimmage, and they run a bunch formation and try to move these guys out. I was in shock when they lined up and I didn't see them in some sort of a spread to get some room out there. But you watch how Kentucky was just flying to the football throughout the game. It's like they've watched the tape too. I don't know. There are times when I think that, don't they understand these other teams watch tape? These other teams do have the analytics and the computers that tell them, okay, there's a 93% chance, for example, that on 3rd and 7, if the ball's on the right hash and they're in the 40-yard line, they're going to run this play, etc. Way too easy to figure out what the Gators are going to run. It's like, I was really, really upset with that with the Gators. And I thought Billy, I think Billy knows that. He's not a dumb guy. He really is. He's a very, very smart guy. I like him, and I think he's a good football coach. But like a lot of football coaches, you get to a point where you got to say, okay, some things have got to change. Spurrier, for example, 1996, goes to FSU. Danny Werfel gets brutalized under center. They come out in the SEC championship game against Alabama in the shotgun. They run the shotgun again in New Orleans, and they win the national championship. And they stayed in the shotgun from then on. So, all coaches, I think, have that moment when they
the aha moment.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Brenden. Yeah. It's an aha moment, like
this works, this doesn't work, this is what we should be doing more.
I'm doing something's got to change here.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring in this guy because we only have him for a little while into the program right now. One of my favorite guys
What's up, man? Brenden?
In the world is the Minister of Information from Graham Hall. Welcome to the program, sir. Loving the dew. How are you doing today?
Well, I can't complain, man. Other than having to be at jury duty for 7 hours today, I can't complain.
Is it a good case? I know you can't talk about it, but
well, I'm not part of it, so I can tell you all the details. I'm just glad I'm not going to have to hear it through Friday because, man, this is a busy beat. A lot is going on right now. The last thing I want to do is be away from it whatsoever. I know Florida fans have a lot of questions, have a lot of concerns, and I don't know if they're going to get the answers they want until maybe this weekend and beyond.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about the press conference today. I mentioned to Franz that Billy looked rattled, a little worn thin, and understandably so, considering Franz was talking about how he thinks Billy's a good coach. He thinks he's got the chops. How much of this is playing at Florida, Graham? How much of this is that it's so hard to sort of conceive that whole notion that you're going to come into this giant fishbowl? And is that what Billy's sort of going through, or do you think it's something else?
I think there's a ton of pressure. I'm not putting this on the fans. Billy Napier knew the program he was coming into, right? He knew that this was a program that over the last 2 decades, let's even keep it there, had won 2 national championships, had signed the #1 overall recruiting class, had the lowest of lows and a lot of highs, right? He knew that this was going to be a fan base who had seen it all, right? Mm-hmm. And they were going to call it how they saw it. When things were bad, they were going to let the coach hear it. And things were great, they're going to love you. They're going to buy your food at Publix. They're going to treat you like your royalty. That's how it is. Any coach who was, and Billy Napier, when he said this, when he got here, he said, I understand the expectations. I understand the pressure. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to have a patient approach. I'm not going to rush into things. And I still get that vibe from him. I still get that sense from him that he understands that this is not going to be on everyone else's timeline, right? And what I mean by that is you can't compare this to how he built Louisiana into a double-digit winning team in year 2. You can't compare this to Urban Meyer's second year at a program, because if you watch Swamp Kings, and I said this to people time and time again, if anything, that Swamp Kings, if you want to call it a documentary, I'm not going to stop you, but what it drove home was that Urban Meyer's methods were unsustainable. And what you're trying to get out of Billy Napier is the long game. You're trying to get a program that is sustainable, that has facilities, that is able to recruit on a consistent level year to year, is able to maximize the portal, and is not going to be a 2, 3, 4 year thing where you're sitting here 2 decades later and being like, oh, that was so great, but look where we are now. You're trying to restore the program to the highs that you've experienced, but are able to be sustainable and consistent. That is not going to be an overnight process. Now, you look at Tennessee, you look at even Florida State right now. They are in, I think, a peak period, right? Where we are still, and Florida fans, especially who follow Dan Mullen, know this, we're still kind of waiting to see how their tenures are going to play out. They're experiencing success right now, but Florida fans have seen that success with Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen. That doesn't mean that those are long-term contenders. Billy Napier is trying to play the long game of rebuilding this program, and it may not be as pretty initially as those other programs. Now, I think that it's important to keep in mind that you've seen a lot of positive stuff. Right now, the number 4 recruiting class in the nation, right? Nearly every transfer portal evaluation has been, I think, a success, outplayed predictions, has been able to bring in first and second year players who are able to compete and play serious minutes. Now, is that going to lead to being a contender in year 2? In my mind, I never expected it to be. I mean, a few months ago, we were talking about maybe a 5-win season, maybe an 8-win season, but somewhere right in between there, right? So you knew 3 months ago that these growing pains were going to happen. I understand that things are not great right now for Florida fans, especially coming off of a loss against a program that has beat you, 4 of the last 6 times that you beat for 3 decades in a row. That is not a great experience, and I don't blame anyone for feeling upset about that. But Billy Napier is as upset as you are, and I think that is the big takeaway. We've seen coaches that are just, checked out, don't have the right message, don't seem emotionally invested. And I can tell you that Billy Napier he's not having, he's not falling, down and unable to find answers. He is devastated right now at what is happening, but the guy is showing up every day, motivated to fix it. And I think that if he's still confident that he's going to fix it, I don't know why Florida fans are already losing faith in him.
Right.
At this 9-9 start. I mean, Mike Norvell was 6-12 in 2 years at FSU. I know what Josh Heupel did is impressive. I'm not taking away from that, but this is normal, right? This is not anything atypical in college football. You're going to have some growing pains, and I know that Florida fans are a proud bunch, and they hate going through it, but this is nothing out of the ordinary. It's too soon to be out on him in my mind. Now, I think he understands that after this season, let me say that again, after this season, potential changes need to be weighed. I want to tell people right now, if you are so certain that mid-season changes are going to lead to wholesale improvements, I mean, I've got lakefront property in Idaho to sell you. That is not
Arizona.
It's not the case, man. This team could be even worse if they try and blow some things up, if they panic, if they freak out. Things could be worse.
I agree, and I wanted to ask you both this, France, and I'm going to let you answer. I don't mean to.
I know I ranted a little bit, so thanks for letting me go on, man.
No, it's good. This is good. My question is that there's a lot of talk about what the Gators did wrong. Kentucky manhandled the Gators. In the gaps. Every facet of the game, they seemingly. Were overtly physical. How good is Kentucky, Franz?
Well, here's the thing. Graham was correct. Florida got manhandled, just absolutely beaten up in the trenches on both sides of the football, which is something I didn't see that coming. I don't know if Graham did or not. I did not see that coming, not after the way that Florida handled Tennessee. And Florida did a terrific job of handling Tennessee. in the first half of that game. But they've had 10 straight bad quarters. The 4 quarters against Charlotte, those weren't good quarters. They were okay quarters because you didn't lose that football game, but they weren't good quarters of football. So we've had 10 straight bad quarters. I agree also. There will not be wholesale changes. Now, I think there will be changes. I think he may try, for example, to spread the offensive line out, get some bigger gaps. You can do that kind of stuff. Take a little bit wider split to give your offensive lineman a little bit of room in there, to give yourself, instead of allowing the other team to bunch its defense front 7 up, you can spread them out a little bit more, etc. like that. And they may need to do that. That kind of stuff is doable and correctable during the season. But I agree with you, Graham. They're not going to make any kind of a wholesale change. You're not just not going to see that at this point in the year. It might be a technical standpoint, like they start going on different snap counts. Maybe go a 2-back set, or maybe go double tight end all the time. I don't know that, but those things they're not huge changes. Those are the kind of things that you can do on the fly. And we got to remember they got a week off before Georgia, and that's always a good time. That open date is always a good time to make minor changes, but it's not going to be wholesale. And I think people want wholesale changes, but they're not going to get them.
Yeah. Well, Graham, do you agree with that assessment?
I don't think we're going to see major changes during the season. I don't think it's as beneficial as people are making it out to be. I do think, and I'm reading the comments here, and I understand where people are coming from. I understand why you're frustrated, and people may think I'm making excuses for this team, but you all know how inexperienced and young this team is. The reality is that this Florida team is closer to the one that you have seen at home. They do not play like themselves on the road. When you have young, inexperienced players, it comes down to 2 things: veteran players and just, I hate to say experience, but those 2 things are not necessarily a given, right? You need to have guys who understand what is going to happen on the road. And that is not something that this team has shown me time and time again. I'm more willing to believe that this team is capable of the ceiling of Tennessee than believing that they're as bad as Kentucky. And I encourage everyone to think about that, because they're not fooling you when they go and play at home and they look really good and they can score 40 points and beat Tennessee. And, they're not fooling you. That's not a fool's gold type victory in my mind. I do think that this inexperienced team going on the road, having an offensive line that's been banged up, rotating consistently on the defensive line, this team is definitely lacks an edge on the road right now. And that is going to come with time. And I think Billy Napier understands that. That's part of why he's not panicking as much as the fan base, because he understands these are growing pains, right? You're going to have to kind of deal with some of these things to become hardened and improve. But this mass panic as if everything is so bad after one game, when Florida's sitting here at 3-2, should be 4-2 after this weekend, has a chance to be 5-2 heading into the bye week, knowing what South Carolina and Vanderbilt have shown. I think that you look at this team and say that if you end up losing to 2 teams that should be ranked in the top 15, Utah and Kentucky, you're not as bad of a program as you're being made out to be. Now, I understand the expectations are very, very high. And Florida's coaching staff setup is unique because there were only 5 teams coming into this year that didn't have an on-field special teams coordinator. And then you factor in that Billy Napier is your offensive coordinator, and that makes Florida's setup definitely unique. Moving forward after the season, if we kind of have a situation similar to Dan Mullen after 2020, where there was all this call for Todd Grantham and John Hevesy to maybe be coaching elsewhere, let me call it that. When those changes didn't happen, that told me, okay, we have a real problem here. I know people were panicking before the shoe toss and all that stuff, but when they didn't make changes after the season in 2020, that I think was definitely one of the big signs that this thing's not going to work out. This is year 2, people. After the season, let's sit back, evaluate, see what moves Florida makes. And if they don't make any moves, then a lot of these concerns, a lot of these comments, I think are very warranted. And, I'm kind of in wait and see mode right now, because I think even with this team, if they win 7 games, maybe if they can find a way to win 8 games, still possible, absolutely. A lot of the panic will subside, and we'll look back and be like, why were we trying to blow it up in the middle of year 2? Knowing how much more damage that can cause. It could cause the recruiting to fall apart, how guys could maybe want to leave after the season because they see the head coaches maybe panicking, and they see that, hey, man, I want to get off this ship before it sinks. You don't want any of that. You don't want your head coach to be blowing things up in the middle of the season. You don't want him screaming at assistants, whether it's Chris Couch, Rob Sales, whoever you want to take the blame out on. You don't want him being Trent Dilfer, right? You all saw that clip. You don't want him freaking out. What do they say about leaders? They are composed even when faced with adversity. And I have seen nothing but that from Billy Napier. Has he shown a little bit of concern recently? Has he struggled with the losses? Yes, absolutely. But he has not wavered in his faith in who this team is. Go to his press conference today. He said, I love this team. We have good veteran players. We are improving. We're inexperienced. I have not lost my faith in them. And I believe him. And I don't think he has any reason to lose faith in them, because it is too soon. He understands that this ship is not, it may be taking on water, but it's not sinking. And
well, I agree. I mean, I tend to agree. I'm going to cut you off, but Franz, how much of this is the way that these losses happen? They are really bad in a sense of it's coming down to 13 guys on the field. It's coming down to a lot of really not ticky-tacky, but bad penalties that shouldn't occur. And these things are, continuously happening, right? And those are coaching errors. I mean, look, Billy on 3rd down and his play calling, not so great, right? Red zone production, abysmal, right? We haven't even gotten into the defensive part of it. No takeaways, getting beat off the line of scrimmage, no gap management. Offensively and defensively, line of scrimmage, these guys don't look prepared. Is this a coaching sort of gaffe, or is this what Graham is saying? It's just a lot of new players, and at this level, at the Florida Gator level, how much of that is acceptable, right? I think that's where a lot of people are falling off here. I mean, I was here at the after Salt Lake, sort of came back to the middle again, and I'm sort of just, at the point it was like, well, this is what we've got, and and this is what you ride with right now, because you can't change at this point. But I want to know how much of this is coaching and how much of it is maybe there's too many coaches. I've said that from the beginning. It seems to be difficult to get a message down the line to everyone that this is what we're doing right now.
Some of it is coaching, and there's no denying some of it is coaching, but not all of it. And people want to point fingers. And I get, Billy falls on the sword. He doesn't blame his assistants. He doesn't blame his players. I give him credit for that. I think that's the smart thing to do at this point. What are you going to do? Go out there and tell him rip and shred your coaches, and then go in there and say, hey, I want you to get these guys ready for the next game? No, you don't do that. Goodness, you follow the sword, you take it over. Let me quickly, there's one guy out here who keeps saying, I didn't call out Foley in 2001. You're full of it. I did. Give me a break. Calm down. Get off your high horse. You're out of your mind. Okay. All right. Now,
take him down, Franz. Get him, Franz.
Let me
guy.
Let me go for it. Some of it is coaching, because you're not getting through, and
it's coaching,
and it's not necessarily that this guy doesn't know how to teach this guy the proper way of doing things.
Right.
It's sometimes it's a matter of the case that the guy hasn't figured out how to get in this guy's head to get him to understand what he's supposed to do and how to do it and when to do it.
But what changed from the first half of Tennessee to the second half of Tennessee and then beyond? Like, there was a massive shift from this team scoring at will, running up the gut, to I can't score a touchdown, and to now, what we just saw the last, really 8 quarters. What changed?
I think Graham might agree with me here on this. I think when you get a team down, you got to go with the old Spurrier way of doing things, which is you stomp the hell out of them when they're down, and you make them wish they had never taken up the game. You sit there in your sideline and say, you know what? Never hung half 100 on Georgia and Athens. You do stuff like that. Or you do like the Urban Meyer, and you sit there and you call timeout twice with 40 seconds to go, and you let that humiliation set in. Remember that look of my grandma? You were just 4 years old at the time, but you're so young. Great.
Youthful.
Youthful. There we are. He's got good hair. My
Botox.
God, the guy's got good hair.
Great hair.
But there's that look of Mark Richt, and they show it on CBS. He's looking up at the scoreboard and that clock. Urban is called timeout, and that look is priceless. And it was a look of, I just got humiliated by a master humiliator. Urban Meyer did that. That's what I know, that I believe Billy's got to learn to do that. He had that opportunity against Tennessee. Now, on one hand, you don't want to blow a game. You don't want to be the guy that sits there and says that, like you said, Gus Malzahn, my gosh, you gave up 86 points in the last quarter to lose to Baylor? Something like that. I forget how many it was, but that was brutal. You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy. You want to be the guy that wins games, and you understand that, my goodness, they don't have a special category for blowout wins and just regular wins. They're all W's and L's. But I think this is one of the things he's going to have to learn. And the great coaches know how to do it. They keep the pedal on the metal, or however you want to call it. They keep the gas and keep their foot on the gas long into the game, and they make sure that when they do let it off, the game, there's no way the other team can beat them. And he's got to learn that. And I think by taking the foot off the gas, it set the tone for 4 mediocre quarters against Charlotte. I think you got to send a message to your team. Hey guys, we are on a search and destroy mission. I just believe that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's sort of I'm not downplaying what you said, but I think that is a given. That's what you do as a head coach. And then when you're talking about being a head coach, now we get into this whole, there's no offensive coordinator, really in the booth helping Billy call these plays. Billy's calling these plays from the sideline. Lots of scuttlebutt about, hey, Billy's going to have to bring in somebody. I've heard a couple of different times that he's talked to even the Lagways about, don't worry, next year we're going to have an OC. That's, not it's substantiated. It's just some rumor. But that what I'm saying is that, how much do you agree with that, Graham? That Billy should be more in this sort of motivating position, as what we see a lot of traditional head coaches are, that you make the ultimate decision about, what play is going out or not, but you have somebody dedicated to running the offense and somebody dedicated to running to the defense. Because I feel like even Austin's sort of clipped a little bit once in a while. I feel like Billy tries to do too much, and maybe that's his biggest knock.
Yeah, I think on the outset, it's easy to make that opinion, and absolutely, I don't blame anyone for having that. I've seen him labeled a conservative play caller, someone who's not cutthroat, whatever you want to call it. All these opinions. The 2 words that I like to use, and you can take them or leave them. I'm not trying to force my opinion ever on anyone. Okay. I see him as minimizing risk.
Yeah.
Now maybe you don't like hearing that, but go back to the Tennessee game. they could have attempted to blow that team out, and Tennessee could have taken advantage of turnovers, capitalize on momentum, and maybe they lose that game if they try and be too risky. What Billy likes to do is minimize the chances that Florida will lose the game in their own right. If they get beat, they get beat. If a better team beats them, that happens. But minimizing risk, playing to your game plan is who Billy Napier is. And I understand why people are frustrated by that, especially when you come from an Urban Meyer, you come from a Dan Mullen, you come from Steve Spurrier. I don't blame anyone for being frustrated by a head coach that in this day and age is analytically driven and minimizes risk. I don't blame anyone for being frustrated by that, but that may be who Billy Napier is. It's too soon to know. And maybe this program changes when he maybe lets the reins off a little bit and someone else, if that happens after this season, is in charge of play calling duties. The analogy I'll leave y'all with is, and I think everyone out there can understand this, when you make yourself successful in your profession and you have gotten to the pinnacle of your profession, giving up one of the very things that got you there is something I think we all can sympathize with. If you ever get too big to the point where you have to reassess if you're really that good at something that people your whole life have told you about, I think a lot of us can understand that that is not an easy thing to do. And it's not something that you think you can do in the middle of the season.
Ever, really. I mean, Urban Meyer talked about it last week with us. He says, look, when a coach loses, it's at this level, it is devastating.
Yeah.
To take a loss.
And Brenden, you were there. We talked to Billy in July.
Yeah.
At SEC Media Days, and we asked him the question everyone's asking now. We asked him if he's still going to be the play caller. We asked him that on July 20th, everybody, 3.5 months ago, and he said no. That is the end of the conversation. It's not going to change midseason. I respect guys like Russ Callaway. I think Russ Callaway is a very, very wise offensive play caller. I think he has a great future in this business. But I think putting that on him right now, in the first year of him being a position coach, say that's what happens, is not going to lead to a better result right now. I know it's what no one wants to hear. I know it's what no one wants to hear, but I think it has to be said.
I think you may see Russ Callaway a little bit more involved in the play calling, but Billy will make the calls because
I agree. I agree.
I think Billy is the type that will listen to the guys in the booth and say, okay.
And I hate to cut you off, but that is so wise and Billy said that today. He said he's going to constantly evaluate what he does. And I do think that he's not going to shut out his assistants if they have a way to improve the team. That is not who he is. If that's a possibility, he's going to listen to it. He's shown that time and time again. So anyone believing that he's not assessing that there's a better option, it's not stubbornness that is keeping him the play caller. It's just that maybe there's not an immediate improvement they can make right now.
I think he's a smart guy. I think that Graham and Brenden, correct me if you think I'm wrong. He came from the Sun Belt, and he's having to deal with athletes who are on both. Everybody in the SEC's got 22 exceptionally good athletes. Everybody. Now, where the game changes is where that next 11 and that next 22 and that next 33 guys come from, because you can't just win with 22 guys. You got to have a backup left tackle. You got to have a backup center and so on like that. And if you don't have them, you're not going to win any games. And I think in the Sun Belt, you could get away with fewer players, and not everybody had the great athletes everywhere. And I think he's adjusting as he goes as well. I think it's like in basketball. I think Todd Golden will be the first one to admit that he learned a lot his first year with the basketball team, because it was a whole different ball game in the SEC than it was in the West Coast Conference. And coaches have learning curves too. And I think too often we forget that coaches have a learning curve, and they get to a new level and they've got a period of adjustment that goes on as well. And it's always different. And I think it was wise. I agree with you, Graham. It was wise to say today, I will be constantly evaluating. That's a good place to begin. I'm not saying it's going to change anything, but they got 7 games. It's 7 games. If the Gators win, if the Gators go 4-3 over the last 7 games, I'm not saying that's out of the question. They go 4-3, they're 7-5. Not bad for a team that Stuart Mandel predicted to go 3-9.
Well, okay, sure, we can speculate on that, but I'm here to play the devil's advocate because I don't know. I've been off and on with this entire process since Salt Lake, but what happens? I don't know why everyone's looking past Vandy like it's just a gimme.
No.
It's not a gimme. Right now as Gator fan, I have to learn to accept that Kentucky owns us. Kentucky owns the Gators in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years. Now we're going into this Vanderbilt game doesn't feel all that super winnable. Even Missouri gives me pause, right? What happens if the wheels come off? Then what? Because then you're looking at the thing that's sort of the saving grace for Billy right now. I mean, not that he needs it. I'm sure he's got a deal, and as far as he's not going anywhere this year. But what happens when you start losing recruits from 2024 because of potentially? And what happens to you? I know Billy is a really sound human being, but this job burns out the best of the best. What happens to you, Billy? What happens to the team? Whatever. If you lose to Vandy, you lose to Missouri, you get blown out by Georgia, South Carolina takes you to the woodshed. What happens then? Is he gonna? Does he maintain? Do boosters come in and say no? I mean, I don't know. What do you? I'm asking the question.
Listen, when Dan Mullen was winning, when they were going 10-2, 9-3, that locker room was more divided than it is right now. And I asked Graham Mertz about this after the game on Saturday. The most important thing that this team can do right now is not point fingers, not look at it as offense versus defense, as if the defense is killing it and the offense can't lead them, and because it can switch on game to game, as you saw. This team has to stay unified. They have to understand that they're a team that is going to lose maybe 1-2 starters from this team next year if they keep everyone together, and it's going to sign a top 5 class. And Billy Napier has nailed the transfer portal evaluations. I know next year's schedule is very daunting, but there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, even right now, about the future of the program. The worst thing that they can do is, even if the losses pile up, and there are going to be more losses this season, guys, let's be completely honest. After every loss, if this team becomes more and more fractured, that is the biggest problem. Right now, the majority, the significant majority of that locker room believes that Billy Napier is the right guy for the job. Until that changes, I'm not as concerned about the on-field results when it correlates.
But when does it change, Graham? Does it change if you lose to Vandy again?
So, like I said earlier, I think that Florida beats Vanderbilt because I do think that this team is kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing when it comes to playing on the road and playing at home, right? I think that, last season going to Vanderbilt, early kickoff, that team was thinking it was the Vanderbilt of the 80s, right? And they went against a running back that, as you saw last week, and Ray Davis, could be a future NFL guy. And he totally dominated them last season. Dominated them, and he did it again this year. And I don't think they're the same Vanderbilt team. I would be surprised if it's a close game. I will eat crow on here next week. You got me on next week if it's a close game. I would be surprised by that. Missouri is I've seen comments in here about clock management. You want to talk about clock management? Go watch Missouri's games. I know that we can pay attention to what's going on in our own backyard too much, and we think that we're the only ones that are having leaves blown over our yard and everything's all messy. But I'm telling you, other neighbors got more problems, okay? Missouri is a team that has done everything they can from a clock management aspect to lose several games this year that they have ended up winning, okay? So if you can find a way to go to Columbia, if you can beat Vanderbilt, if you can find a way to beat an Arkansas team that looks much more beatable right now than they looked 6 weeks ago, that's 3 wins right there. You're talking about bowl eligibility. You're talking about building on next season, going out, landing a top 5 class, transfer portal. that may not be what people want to hear, but if you ask me, that is far more valuable than an extra win or two this season. I got to break it to you guys. Florida's not winning the SEC East this year.
No.
No.
How many? I mean,
You're
y'all have
shitting
quality
me.
nights. You're not first or last, right? So
Graham,
Get
this is about
out.
Florida.
Get out.
I'm the bearer of bad news, but this is about Florida building for the future so they can be competitive next year, Franz. When we're sitting here finding new ways to
Better
compete.
I mean, have you seen the schedule next year, right?
That is, 11
say
Power 5 teams and a Samford team that came in here a couple years ago and scored 50 plus, right? So I absolutely understand the concerns. Next year is the make or break of competitiveness, right? If you don't nail the transfer portal, if you don't get first-year players to play next season while retaining the majority of your roster from this year, then next year, I think the criticism, you think it's right here right now, it's up here next year at this time. If Florida is in the same situation, if they're stuck in the mud and churning and finding new ways to lose games, that is when year 3, the pressure, I think, is absolutely amplified. But right now, in my opinion, it is still too soon to write Billy Napier's obituary at Florida.
All right. Well, fair enough. Before you, Franz, before you respond, I just want to tell everyone really quick about Gainesville's newest independent MRI facility and Titan MRI, North Central Florida's newest premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. They're excited to let you know that Titan MRI is now open and serving the greater Gainesville and North Central Florida areas. They're focused on patient care and having great customer service and experience. They know people live a busy life, and although they have a regular business hours, they're available by appointment in evenings and weekends, and in order to meet any of your scheduling needs. Even walk-ins are available if they have the time. Their MRI equipment is modern, and it is some of the easiest places to get in. I referred a friend the other day to go up there who was helping her mother out, and she couldn't get into a local MRI here in Ocala. Boy, she called Titan MRI. They had her in an hour versus waiting 3 weeks. Titan MRI is your place to go. You can check them out on the web at titanmri.com. So, Franz, go ahead.
I'm still in shock that Graham has gone out on a limb and said the Gators are not going to win the SEC.
The SEC East? He said the East. Calm down.
Well, even the East. I mean,
lower expectations.
Consider me shocked.
That's what I do all the time, Graham. That's how I date.
Goodness, we've got this one clown on the message board that's just absolutely cracking me up.
That's all right. He's driving. You know what? He's just making me money. Just let him go.
He's got a finger to point at everybody. Doesn't.
Oh, good. Keep posting. You're making me money. Thank you very much.
You got 3 pointing back at yourself. Anyway, you're right. This season isn't over. 4 wins, entirely possible. And you could lose 4. That's entirely possible too. Who knows? You got to play it on the field for a reason, and a lot of things can happen. They could make a couple of little tweaks in the offense and get Graham Mertz throwing more often to Billy. To our wonderful wide receiver. I mean, my gosh,
Well, you got plenty to choose from, but all night I'm seeing the same thing in the chat, and the same thing. It's Strickland's fault. It's Strickland. You got to blame Strickland. Okay, Graham, I'm going to let you go first. I don't think Strickland is to blame here, but what do you think?
All right, I'm going to say my piece, and then I got to hop off.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've kept you way too long.
I had a long day. In case anyone didn't know, they made me do jury duty this morning, so I missed.
I don't care, Graham.
I know.
Okay. I mean, you got big hair. You're young. You look sexy with that Botox. I don't care anymore. So sorry.
You weren't supposed to tell anyone that I got the.
Well, we'll talk about it later.
How can you not tell? So, listen, Scott Strickland, I have a ton of respect for him. Okay. For so long about Jeremy Foley, it was about facilities. And now you have those in place. You have NIL in place. You have a Ben Hill Griffin renovation on the rise. You have a coach. You have a AD who gets that and is willing to shell out for coaches. Okay. Now, if you ask Scott Strickland, he would tell you that he has not nailed every coaching hire. He will take accountability for that. Now, from hiring Dan Mullen to now hiring Billy Napier, I think he has learned what he is looking for more in a head coach. With all that said, he hired Billy Napier understanding that this was not going to be a 1, 2, maybe even a 3-year thing, right? He understands, and I hate to even say this, but he understands that he may not get another shot at hiring a head coach for the football program at Florida. Okay.
Yeah, he
So with
gets
that
that.
said, he is going to ride by Billy, barring a major scandal, until Billy has proved himself to not be the guy. And that has not happened yet.
Right.
Okay.
Yet.
Those who don't know Scott Strickland, Scott Strickland
There's some yets out
is
there.
a former PR guy. He
one of the best.
Baylor.
Yeah.
One
If
of
you go
the
back, he
best.
joined Baylor in the worst time in Baylor history. I'm not going to rehash it. Okay. He understands what a coach should say. He knows what he's looking for, and he has learned a lot over the last, 22 years. He has not seen anything out of Billy Napier yet that makes him think that he's not the guy at Florida long term.
Yeah.
And you may disagree with that. You may be upset with that, but that is the reality of the situation. Now, have there been some concerning moments? Have there been some questions? Sure. And I think after the season, there's going to be some tough conversations that have to be had, especially the way that the boosters are kind of acting like now, right now.
Well, they're
I'm here.
Boosters are being boosters.
Boosters are being boosters, but they're not being boosters in October 2021 boosters, like what we were hearing back then. It is not the same dialogue conversation. It's not the same. Okay. There's some concern, but they're not thinking, oh, we need to blow things up right now. Okay.
Well, where are you going to go?
A lot of positive moves from Billy Napier.
Yeah.
Transfer portal, recruiting, Austin Armstrong. I mean, I can go on and on and on that seem to be forgotten about. It's kind of like when you bring home a test and you missed a couple questions and your mom harps on the ones you missed rather than everything you're doing right. Okay.
Yeah, I do that to my kid every day.
Yeah. Brenden, I know you and I both went through that, man. We weren't the best students, I'm sure. I know I was. So
I was awful.
Myself.
Still am.
When I got a B+, I was telling my mom about every question I got right. Could I have done better? Yes. But I wasn't an abject failure like I was being made out to be. That's the reality. Let's just reality check right now. It is too soon for Scott Strickland to get criticism of his hire, Billy Napier, because look at next year. This could be we could be sitting here revisionist history saying, oh, what a great hire.
Well,
and you don't know.
You don't know. He's Graham Hall. And thanks for coming in last minute tonight. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you and who you work for. And all,
is the spot. Swamp247.com. I got to shout out my coworkers,
Yeah.
Jacob Rudner and Blake Alderman. They held it down today like they do every single day. Consistent. Franz, you can tell them some of the best in the business.
I want you to look at that, Graham.
Look at that hair.
Just wanted to show you. I had hair too.
You did. You kind of got the Jacob cut.
I know. I didn't
Really
have it like
sexy
you,
there.
but I had hair.
Exactly. Make sure you follow them, Franz. They do a great job.
They are.
I wouldn't be nearly as good as I am without them.
You and Jacob are a terrific team.
You really
guys
are.
He makes me better. I hope I can say the same about him. Follow me on Twitter at Graham Hall. I'll be back real soon. Brenden, you're the man.
Next week, I want to talk to you about Vandy. Let's see what happens.
I hope I don't have to say too much about Vandy because I can maybe gloat a little bit. And
well, listen. Yeah, gloat away. Thank you so much. You are truly one of my great friends in this industry. Thank you, Graham.
All the respect in the world. I'll see you guys later.
All right, he's Graham Hall. Thank you so much, Graham. I appreciate it. Franz, we're still endeavoring for other guests tonight, but I think I sent him the link, but I don't know if he got caught up or not. I would like to listen to this question. I think this is your question that you asked Billy today, and I want to get it in. If it's not, it's Graham's. But I'm going to play this really fast, and then we'll roll a Meldon Law break. And this is from today, Billy Napier at the Monday press conference.
From your perspective, is there any underappreciated involvement, maybe that you've seen that fans or we can't see just this year from this team that you are proud of the growth that you've seen? Maybe just we wouldn't see or understand.
Yeah, I mean, I love our team. I think we have some veteran players that have good perspective, that have maturity, that are able to, they have reason. You know, they understand, they have a pulse on where we're at, what needs to be done better. And in particular today, their desire to take that and run with that, with their position group, with their unit. So I think we got a good group of kids, you know, that are giving really good effort. And I think as they, you know, they're growing up, you know, and I think that we have leaders that are trying to lead. We have young players that are getting experience and trying to get better, you know. So, you know, I think that ultimately that's what I would say.
You played with such emotion and fire when you came out against Tennessee. Did you see that same thing there at Kentucky, or was there something that just fizzled and wasn't there?
Yeah. I felt like we were lethargic early in the game. I do. So to answer your question, no, I don't think we quite had the same edge that we had when we played at Tennessee. Now, you know, I think reality is when you go play on the road in this league, you know, starting fast is important every week, but when you're on the road, it's really important. All of a sudden you take a few punches, you contribute by making your own self-inflicted mistakes. Then you look up here and you play 3, maybe 4 possessions in the game, and you're down 3 scores. You know, so, and their crowd's into it, and ultimately all those things contributed to the result we got Saturday. So it's part of the things that we're trying to improve at.
Now, Franz, I want you to hold your response to that because I know you want to talk about it. We're going to come back right after this break from Meldon Law, and we're going to talk about Franz's question and give our final thoughts right after this.
Meldon, Jeffrey, you do a show where you get asked a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it. In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV. But after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Meldon Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Meldon. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Meldon, and that's good to know because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us through. So Meldon Law, they won't back down. They will take your questions about your case if you have a question.
Yes, whether it's a new case or an existing case, give us a call. We'd be glad to go over it with you. There's no charge to review your case with you. And a lot of times it makes good sense just to get a second opinion.
Good stuff from Meldon Law. They don't back down, but they will give you a second opinion.
Thanks to Meldon Law. Check them out on meldonlaw.com. Jeffrey's a great guy, and they do a great job. Franz, your question to Billy today. Refresh people who didn't see it. What was your question, and what was the response?
I asked him, I said, did you have the same kind of fire and emotional buy-in? Did you feel it for the Tennessee game at Kentucky? And he said, no, we were lethargic going out. And they were. And again, now I know some people on this message board are just going to go ballistic when I say this, but do you know how many teams in the SEC are younger than the Gators? One. Do you know how many teams in all of Division I are younger than the Gators? 22. That's it. The Gators are young. They're really, really young. And I know some of you people don't want to hear it, but they are. This is one of the things I was alluding to earlier. that you can coach well, but some young kid hasn't learned how to be coached yet. Doesn't mean you're a bad coach, and doesn't mean he's a bad kid. It just means that sometimes you got to find new ways to get through to guys before they can figure it all out. And it's a never-ending process. And sometimes coaches have to go through that too. We got to remember, Urban Meyer came back from that game in Columbia, and they, from LSU in 2005, and they started going through everything they were doing to change the offense to make it more adaptable to Chris Leak. They're going to, I still think they're going to have to make some changes, and they're not going to be big time changes. They're going to be very subtle changes, but there will be changes made, and it's okay if you do that. That's what coaching is all about. Now, I want to address one other thing, Brenden, and that is Scott Strickland. He ain't going anywhere, folks.
No.
And, come on, get a real life. The guy has raised so much money so that the facilities can be upgraded. And yes, to our clown bear, I did question facilities way back, even in 2001. I did. And I did throughout the 2000, from 2010 onward.
You did.
I even brought it up on shows and was called an absolute idiot because I pointed out something that Will Muschamp told one of my best friends. He would not take a recruit down to the practice field because there were so many holes in the practice field that he didn't want to see a recruit break an ankle during practice. That I did that. I called that out.
Well, no question. I mean, you've always been on top of that, Franz. We've had that conversation many a times. I think right now, and my position actually tonight has just been more of a devil's advocate. I agree with what you and Graham are saying, because here's the other side of it. What are you going to start over again? Like this,
No.
you got to ride this out, right? You got to see what happens. I think we got excited after Tennessee. I think Gator fan got excited after Tennessee, understandably so. But the reality is like a lot of those problems just don't go away that quickly. And when you go on the road and you play a noon game in Kentucky, it's weird, right? It's different than what you did for the previous other games. So I get that. I was a little nervous about that being an early game or whatever. But the point is that I think we see a Kentucky team actually go and play pretty well against Georgia. I think we see this. I think Stoops has got these guys coached up pretty well, even though that they didn't have a strength of schedule prior in the 4 games. But we did see a fairly well-coached, physical Kentucky defense. I don't think their offense should have gotten as many yards as they did. I don't think that I don't think a lot of those guys their skill position players are as good as they came out to be. But, Austin Armstrong is still new to this entire process. When you go on the road, things get different. They get more difficult, even in Lexington.
Yeah. Well, let me respond to somebody on here. Mike White was hired by Jeremy Foley. Give me a break.
He's a Foley.
Dan Mullen. I'm going to tell you right now, Dan Mullen was an outstanding hire. But
everybody was on board with that.
Here's what the problem was with Dan. Scott Strickland expected Dan to recruit. Now that he stepped up to this level, to recruit to this level. You can't win at Florida with the same players you win with at Mississippi State. No. That's one of the things that nobody knew that he wouldn't do. And he didn't do it. And Graham was right about another thing. That Florida locker room was divided in 2020. And it wasn't a united locker room. Dan could have been a great hire. He was a good hire at the moment. He could have been a great hire. You know, we could say the same thing about Jim McElwain. He was a good hire at the moment, but you know, it's like if I ever write my memoirs, it's going to be entitled "It Seemed Like a Great Idea at the Moment." You know, people ask me what happened to you. You got a divorce. I said it seemed like a good idea at the moment.
It seemed like a great idea at the time. Yeah.
But here's the thing: stuff happens in coaching. Stuff happens. Everybody's fired up and mad right now. Everybody is fired up and mad right now. But let me put it this way. Florida didn't show up to play at Kentucky. That's indisputable. They didn't. This is one of these things they're going to have to learn how to do. Yeah. Consistency trumps inconsistency. The teams that win are the teams that are consistent. It's like Alabama. People say, well, how does Nick Saban do it every year? And everybody wants to say it's only because he's got the best players. He does have the best players. But here's the other thing about him. They have the same consistent method of teaching these guys the same level of accountability, etc. Explain 13 players. We could have had 17 on there and they still would have scored. That's how good they were running the ball right now. Give me a break. Get off this 13 players bit. Anyway,
look,
Florida.
I mean, look, I'm somewhere in the middle here with you and Graham. I can't take up for what I've seen. I don't necessarily like the attitude that I've seen post game press conferences. A lot of this falling on your own sword kind of stuff. That's not my bag. A lot of not blaming the personnel. I say we can do better. We can do better. And I know the dialogue is way different in the locker room. I get it. I know we're under like a filter. I understand that. I know he's got to take the responsibility Billy has to for the loss. Sure, I get that. But I don't think that's what we would have seen from Spurrier, and I don't think that we would have seen that from Meyer. I think that's a different time. We've got transfer portal. We've got a whole recruiting class coming in. You don't want to seem like you're a tyrant. I get that. The PR on this is massive, right? That's why I think Strickland is a fairly good person to be in this situation, because right now you know you're not that good. And you're just hoping to win what you're going to win, but you really want to hold on to 2024. And that's probably the most important thing. So I think, what was it? Somebody said the other day, it's like, I was watching it. This is, Chris Doring. This is really like Billy's first year, right? Billy's guys, this is really like year one for Billy. And I think I'm willing to give that sort of space with it, because there's a big jump here to get better.
40-something guys from last year's team aren't on the team this year.
But by choice, right? In a lot of ways, I know they went to the transfer portal, but they've had a little nudge in that process. I guess I'm sort of like caught between fanboy and trying to be, journalism person and understand it. But it doesn't sit right with me to have. I just don't get comfortable getting comfortable losing to Kentucky.
Yeah,
that's just never going to make me comfortable. If they lose to Vandy that's shit I don't get comfortable with, right? That makes us middle of the road SEC school that is not any sort of dominance. And I think that's the problem with Gator fan.
This is where, and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. This is where 10 years, it's been a 10-year, 11-year backslide. I mean, what we've got going on right now did not happen overnight. It really did not happen overnight.
No.
This is one of these things that has happened. We're talking about, people want to talk to Spurrier. Well, Spurrier came in and had, on the heels of a championship that he won in the ACC, and came in and he lucked into a lot of really good players that first year. I mean, you look at the number of NFL guys that he got inherited. Look at the number of NFL guys that Urban inherited. Look at the number of NFL guys that Billy inherited, and it's not very many. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I know a lot of people are thinking I'm making excuses. I'm not. I'm trying to take an
He had a pretty good quarterback.
I'm taking a pretty, yeah. Yeah, but he also had a quarterback that had one start in his career. You know,
Sure.
Ron Zook, Urban inherited a quarterback. Urban inherited a quarterback that had 30-something starts in his career ahead of him.
Right. But he coached him up.
They coached him up. So
and I think that's what we want to see. We want to see that coaching him up thing. I mean, look, Deion went and won the first 3 games, and get blown out by Oregon and get USC. But he won those first 3 games, right? So you got excited about him. I think Billy's just yet to have that, and
Billy's not a self-promoter, and Deion is a lightning rod.
Yeah,
for attention. And
right. But we like that at Florida, don't we? We like that sexy fanfare shit.
Steve Spurrier was a lightning rod,
right?
And I give him credit for it.
I mean, just break out 4 wide. I mean, I don't think we've seen 4 wide receivers all year. Like maybe switch up from being, hey, we're not run first, we should be throw first. I know Shane Matthews has said a lot of that all year long. Maybe that's a better fit for this team right now. Spread them out, go draw some plays up in the dirt, and go play football, right? A lot of this right now is I feel like we're missing that.
This is one of the things that I think we may see, and I think they understand that. They've been running too much of a bunch formation in here.
Way double tight.
And they need bigger gaps.
Yeah.
And they need bigger gaps. And it's hard to go away from that. I mean, Billy was at Alabama when Lane Kiffin bunched everybody up and had Jacob Coker, and they handed the ball.
It's handed the ball. Henry. Yeah.
And they kept handing it and handing it and handing it to him, and it worked. And he was there when that happened. He was coaching the wide receivers there who were the lonelier than the Maytag repairman because but coaching folks, understand this, and it's not making excuses when we say it. Coaches learn on the fly also. They really do. Spurrier, who people thought would never, ever, ever throw 2 freshman offensive tackles out there, did it in 1992, and everybody thought Steve Spurrier had lost it because the Gators lost a bunch of ball games. But you look what happened. They almost became the only team to beat Alabama because at the end of the year, they were really good. And then they absolutely smoked a really good North Carolina State team in the Fog Bowl over in Jacksonville. Good coaches adjust. Billy Napier this is the part where we're going to find out about Billy Napier, is how much can he and will he adjust? If he does it, then the Gators are going to be all right. If he doesn't, then the Gators aren't going to be all right, and everybody can be talking about how it was a rotten hire. But if he adjusts, we'll see.
We'll see. He's Franz Beard, and one of my best buddies, first of all. Second of all, the best writer on all this stuff almost on a daily basis, and you can check him out at GatorbaitMedia.com. Franz, what's your latest article about, and what are you writing about?
I'm writing my thoughts of the day, and one of the things I'm going to be writing about it is how the SEC is going to get infinitely more difficult next year. And this is when the recruiting is going to take place. This is when that recruiting is going to, we're going to see the difference in the recruiting. Man's a good recruiter. Graham pointed it out earlier. He's really been terrific on the transfer portal. They're going to have to, I can tell you right now, they're going to have a transfer center. They're going to have a transfer left guard, I believe. They're going to have a couple of guys that are going to transfer in, and they're going to need somebody. They're going to need a defensive player or two. But he makes us. This is going to be a good football team coming up. Just right now, it's kind of tough.
Well, if we have all those transfers, I think I'm going to need a heart transplant. It sounds like a lot.
All right, guys.
Hey, Franz Beard, I paid, was it the little thing that Ed McMahon, Delio, whatever, pay homage. Thank you for coming on with me tonight, last minute. And we will talk to you later this week. Check him out on GatorbaitMedia.com.
And I'm speaking at the Ocala Quarterback Club Wednesday night.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I are.
I'll see you Wednesday.
We will.
All right. Franz Beard, thank you very much for joining us tonight. He is the Iron Duke. No question about it. Hey, thank you all for joining us tonight. We had a good crowd tonight. It's unfortunately when we lose, we tend to have a pretty good crowd. That's kind of how things go. People want information. Before everyone takes off, though, I do want to tell you all about our number one sponsor that's been around for a long time, Renstar Medical Research. Renstar Medical Research is a research site located in the beautiful North Central Florida, one of the fastest growing retirement areas in the country. Renstar's research staff works with local physicians and private practice and community hospital settings to provide a multidisciplinary team focused on meeting enrollment goals and while ensuring strict regulatory and protocol compliance. Woo! Say that for your first time like 10 times. Renstar has been a proven reputation of providing high-quality clinical data and adhering to industry-established clinical research guidelines. Renstar has participated in more than 700-plus clinical research studies since the founding in the 1990s. Renstar multidisciplinary staff has more than 225 years of combined experience executing clinical research trials and has participated in phase 1 through 5 research. Check them out right now at renstar.net and tell them Brenden from the Buddy Martin Show sent you. Okay? Thanks to those guys. Thanks to all of our sponsors, of course, Titan MRI, Meldon Law. Thanks to Graham Hall for coming on for extra tonight. We didn't get from our other guests, but we'll get him later on in the week. Thanks to you all for your comments, for being passionate about the show. We're excited about where the show is going. Hey, make sure you smash the subscribe button down there if you're watching on YouTube. That really helps us out. Buddy is fine. Buddy's not in the hospital. No worries. Buddy's good to go. He's healthy. He just took a couple of days respite. He's up north on assignment somewhere. I don't know where he is. Buddy's, he's a crazy cat, that guy. But I wanted to, of course, tell Buddy, love you, Dad. Look forward to seeing you when you get back on Wednesday. Tomorrow night, of course, you're stuck with me again. Sorry for your troubles. But we are going to have a star-studded Tuesday night. Lauren Meadows, I believe, will join us. We've got Kyle Curtis. We've got... I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, I know who I am. Well, we'll call him Mr. Surprise guest for tomorrow night. Because I can't remember everybody on Tuesday nights. But nonetheless, great show for tomorrow night. Check us out. Subscribe to the channel. Go to GatorBait. Do all that kind of good stuff. All of this supports what we're doing, and we really do appreciate it. Okay, I've babbled enough. Go find this little bit of a close. My contacts are getting really dry, all that good stuff. But I will say, as I always do at the end of every show, thanks for watching, and of course, go Gators.